Hello, and welcome to the recording of Webinar 1, delivered as part of the Funding Wellbeing for Education project from the DfE and other partners noted within this slide. As a note to the original slides, they were designed by MindEd and the Anna Freud Centre for this project, then adapted by the Educational Psychology Service and Head Start. The original slides were much longer than this webinar, and we were encouraged to reduce it to help it to be more accessible and suited to the needs of the local area. Given the feedback we've had from schools so far, mainly that this is a busy and challenging time, we felt that the messages presented to school staff needed to be clear, helpful and hopefully not too overwhelming at a time when there's often been a lot of information shared. So we hope we've achieved that. The purpose of the Wellbeing for Education project was to respond to the short to medium-term wellbeing and mental health impacts of COVID-19 and has run from September 2020 and will last until the end of March 2021. The project links to Public Health England's new Every Mind Matters mental health campaign to support children and young people and their parents and carers. It complements the government's long-term plans to implement children and young people's mental health from the Green Paper commitments, including mental health support teams, training for senior mental health leads in schools and colleges, testing approaches to faster access to NHS specialist support, and rollout of the Schools and Colleges Link programme. The government remains committed to improving evidence-based, outcome-focused children and young people's mental health support, including through joint agency planning as a result of the Future in Mind and NHS long-term plan. It also complements the local authority drive to support the wellbeing needs of children, adults and young people in Middlesbrough. The expectation from the DfE and MindEd was that the adapted slides were cascaded to a nominated member of school staff. This was achieved from the original live webinars, before those key members of staff cascade all or parts of the webinar they felt would be helpful to their setting. This may have already happened within your setting, although the challenges in the last few months might have meant this is not possible. If you're listening to this information for the first time, welcome to the project and we hope that you can take from it what's helpful for you. If you've heard some of this before, welcome back and we hope that this is a helpful refresher. If you want to skip to certain slides, the audio is attached to each slide. We hope to guide you through an easily understood psychological education of helpful staff wellbeing practice. We hope the language is presented in a way that can be used by all staff. For those of you paying particular attention to the slides, you might have noticed in the top corner of the last 3 slides there was an empty cup. It will appear on all slides, including those in Webinar 2, as a reminder to look after yourselves first within this work. As the message states, you can't pour from an empty cup, look after yourself first. We thought this was a really important message to share with you as an individual, and for you to remind others about too. Another analogy is to put your oxygen mask on before seeing to others. It's the same principle. For us to be in a position to support those around us, we need to look after ourselves first. We hope that this webinar will be an opportunity for you to take some time out and consider the messages for you as an individual, as well as maybe considering how this might be used within your setting. You might want a pen and paper to write down some of the ideas, or some of your thoughts, or you might just want to think about them. As already alluded to, this webinar is specifically for promoting the wellbeing of staff. Although the messages and some of the activities will certainly be useful for you to use in your discussions with parents, as well as children and young people, we thought it was an extremely important message for you to consider for yourself first as a member of staff, remembering that we need to do this before we can support others. As it states in the slide, for this session we'll be looking at the psychological impact of COVID-19 for staff, the 5 key principles of recovery, the 5 R's to supporting wellbeing, and the 5 ways to wellbeing. You might find the way the models are presented helpful to you, or you might want to adapt to suit your needs. For example, we'll be looking at the 5 ways to wellbeing for you as an individual today, but you might want to do this in your key stage team or even as a whole school. So please use what we present today in a way that's useful to you. So that you're clear about what's being provided within Middlesbrough, here is the offer that was made to schools, some of which is now being delivered. The follow-up sessions is the next step in the project. You might know that we sent out a Slido evaluation to ask school staff what they wanted as support until the end of March. We'll be sending out this offer of the sessions based on this feedback by the end of January. As some of you might be listening to this at home or on your own somewhere, please use this message as a reminder to look after yourself throughout this session. I do not anticipate discussing deeply difficult areas, but with all of these things, sometimes you can be impacted by words or activities in a way that you did not expect. If this happens for you, please take some time out, be kind to yourself and come back to it when you can. So what has been the psychological impact of COVID-19 on you as members of staff in educational settings? There is no doubt that you can think of one, two, maybe many ways in which the last 9 months have impacted you as an individual or as a wider school community. Research carried out in 2020 from the Centre of Mental Health predicts that up to 10 million people, almost 20% of the UK population, will need either new or additional mental health support as a direct consequence of the crisis. 1.5 million of those will be children and young people under 18. Whilst this seems a stark number, and may mean that some staff require a high level of support, in the main, staff will probably not require specialist help, with some of the most protective factors being right in front of us in our own school communities. As shown in the references of these slides, the 2020 studies have shown further the challenges that the pandemic has had in our educational settings. Some of those include fear, stress, death, other losses, low mood, confusion and anger, changes in children's behaviour, and further inequalities and disparities. This has also caused impact on relationships, decreased the flexibility of thinking and coping, diminished the sense of agency and therefore resilience, and closed some doors to learning. What we shouldn't lose sight of is that whilst we've seen these difficulties and experienced these challenges, there's probably been some observed positives as noted within these studies, such as compassion, community-mindedness, concern from others, which has then created opportunities to open doors to new learning, new relationships, increases in flexible thinking and coping, more agency or a sense that you can make changes happen. It's keeping vision of this binocular, seeing both the positive and negative poles that schools and colleges can use to build strength and resilience, being prepared for and if possible avoiding the traps that the adversity might bring. As a result of the significantly difficult and different times, I think it is worth considering an article I read in November 2020, which highlighted why supervision for teachers, although I would say staff in general, is so important at any time, but more so in these times. The article made use of the headlines seen here: Unique Pressures on Teachers. Staff in education settings work with children and young people regularly. They build up relationships, they support changes in their circumstances, they hear and understand their learning needs, and yet for the most part they are not given the space and time to reflect on what effect that might have on them as a professional and as a human being. Surely this must impact teacher well-being, and the opposite, stress and burnout. Anecdotal evidence suggests that teachers are struggling with the bubble system, not just for the children's sake, but for their own. They miss the staff room, the biscuits, the banter, the camaraderie, the support and the hugs. Yes, staff often have line management, but this is not the same. Performance or line management is not the same as supervision. There are, of course, some schools who do this really well, and they are to be celebrated. Does this happen in your school? If not, should it? I'd say yes. They talk about, secondly, supervision as containment. Beyond said to that, to feel contained, therefore, is to feel safe in the knowledge that something or someone else is holding on to the unmanageable. Supervision is about a safe space to explore uncertainties and difficulties in work. It's a way to reflect on what might be happening for you and the situation you are thinking about. As an alternative to one-to-one supervision, the article also highlights the possible solution of having group reflective supervision. The group voice is a powerful voice, yet sometimes sharing anxieties increases anxiety levels in the first instance, but acknowledging difficulties is the first step in working towards a solution. Although reflective supervision is not primarily about finding solutions, it can be solution-focused in its thinking. It's a courageous step for schools to invite their staff to openly share concerns and anxieties they may have, but surely this is what needs to happen for things to move forward. Now more than ever is the time for us to value the staff in our schools, to give them the time and space to reflect on what they are holding. So what do we mean by well-being? The top half of this slide reminds us that well-being can be both subjective or personal, based on people's own views, opinions and judgments, as well as being objective, understood by measurement, assessment and more factual aspects such as having food, physical health, education and finance. Contributors to well-being might include some of those within the slide: physical health, staying fit, social belonging, feeling they function well emotionally, spiritual, intellectual and economic factors, which we will be revisiting within the remainder of this session. The final 3 bullet points help our schools to function at their best. Particularly important for this webinar is the second point. Education staff teach and relate best when they have a sense of well-being. So how are we going to get there? To a point where our staff feel they are working at their best. Hopefully the rest of this webinar might go somewhere in helping you or your staff to achieve this and apply in their practice. We are aware of a wealth of information out there, the challenging situation and the business of schools. With this in mind, we hope to provide you with an easy, accessible messages to take on board yourself or to cascade to your school population. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we're going to look at 3 models of 5. That is, that each model will have 5 elements to it, so hopefully this is something that you can easily share with others and take forward in your practice. To begin with, we're going to look at the 5 key principles of recovery, based on the psychological models of resilience, growth and recovery, positive psychology, as well as the evidence base linking to social, emotional, learning and attainment. These 5 key principles of healthy recovery are argued to be particularly important following a critical incident. So although it might be helpful to think about this now, this could also be applied to other critical incidents that might happen at other times in your school. As with all the 3 strategies we'll talk about today, they can be applied at a whole school level, at a more targeted individual level, depending on the need, without specialist intervention and knowledge. They are built on the foundation of relationships. We'll go through each of the 5 key principles in turn to hear about some of the examples from within research. So the first of the key principles we'll consider is putting emotional well-being first, which might seem obvious, but can be difficult to do when we are busy or under pressure, yet these are the times that we need to do this the most. Remember, this explicitly focuses on staff well-being and how the setting might place emotional well-being of staff first. Using your pen and paper or just thinking about it, what has your setting put in place to put emotional well-being of staff first? Some ideas from the research on how settings have achieved this include explicitly stating the school's focus on well-being, which lays the foundation for successful re-engagement. Include staff in decision-making and planning where possible and appropriate. There's likely to be a need for emphasis on emotional healing, building resilience and restoring of social relationships for staff and children alike. Learning, growth and development need the secure foundation of a sense of safety and emotional readiness. This will require schools to cultivate opportunities to offer emotional support across the community, to one another as staff, to children and young people, and to parents. Remember that this situation has affected the whole community in different ways, including you as a staff member. If you don't feel able, for whatever reason, to address a child or parental concern because of your own challenges, you might need to talk about this with another member of staff. It is okay to admit that someone else might be better placed to offer this support at this time. We are humans first and school staff second. Reach out to your own support networks if you need to. Next is the key principle of reaffirming school's strengths and core values. Again, can you think of ways in which your setting is or has done this? Some ideas from the research include completing a strengths-based audit of what school is doing well. There are lots available if you search for these. See Nottinghamshire County Council for a school reflection tool, which might help you on your journey. Remember the things that were important to you as a school community before the event, including your school ethos and your school values. Remind yourselves of the things that are still the same. Throughout the difficult periods, what strengths did you draw on? And how did you support the well-being of staff? How will your school's strengths and values help you? There will be opportunities and challenges ahead. What are the things that you anticipate you may need extra support with? What can you put in place as a staff member to support your own well-being as much as possible during this period? Thirdly, the key principles of recovery remind us to place relationships at the front and centre. For some of you, this will be the way of working as standard in your setting, but some of you, it may not, or you may not have had the time to come back and remember this. In doing this, remember to ensure that you have clear and regular communication with staff. Remember the principles of active listening, respect, genuineness, being non-judgmental, fully focused on the other person, open body language, not rushing to solutions or advice giving. You might also build in opportunities during the day or week for staff to check in with each other. Next, the fourth key principle of recovery includes reaffirming safety and routines. At these challenging times, it can often be something that we recommend for children and young people. But what about doing this for our staff? Some of the ideas from research include maintaining normal routines, which can be really reassuring for staff. You might want to consider creating a safe space where staff can go to if they're needing a break or feeling overwhelmed, and someone to talk to if they wish. You might think about preparing staff, when you can, in advance for changes that might be occurring. And being patient with staff as they are adjusting to the changes that are happening. Last but not least is the fifth of the key principles of recovery, acknowledging loss, change and bereavement. Has your setting put anything in place to support loss and bereavement for staff? Again, some ideas from the research include reflecting on the different experiences of loss that everyone in the school community has had. How might you do this as a school community? Consider a whole school remembrance event and involve all members of the school community in the planning of this event. It can be helpful to know about psychological models of loss and grief. There are a lot out there that you might find helpful. This one is the dual process model, and it tells us that rather than thinking about grief as a neat process with clear stages, it's helpful to think about how a person might look back, process the loss, and also move forwards towards the future. People will frequently move between the two. This may continue for years, as remembering is part of processing and understanding the feelings of loss. So hopefully going through those 5 key principles have sparked some thinking about what you or others could do to support staff wellbeing in your setting. Another way you could use the 5 key principles of healthy recovery is to ask yourself or reflect with a partner or trusted other the questions on the right of this slide. For example, when thinking about putting emotional well-being first, what would be your answer to the questions, when am I feeling emotionally well? What sort of things am I typically doing? What can I do to demonstrate to myself and to others that I am prioritising emotional well-being? Once you have a few things, you might want to choose one or more to commit to over the next few days. Your partner might check in with you to see how this has been going. Doing the same for the other 4 can lead to you following a much more value-based way of life. As with any strategies to support well-being and other subjects, we will not often find one idea that fits all or be relevant to all. Some are more helpful at a whole school level, others at a more targeted level, and others that work best at an individual level. For this reason, as mentioned at the beginning, we've highlighted 3 different frameworks. The first may have been helpful to you, or you might find the next one more helpful. The second of the 5 key message frameworks is this one developed by MindEd. Maybe this is a bit easier to remember as each of the 5 elements begin with the letter R. The 5 R's are reminders of actions, ways of helping that support recovery of well-being. This nurtures growth, learning and therefore new resilience. Please use the 5 R's in whatever order the situation requires. The 5 R's are just a way of remembering. They include relationships, recognition, reflection, regulation, and resilience. In order to bring the 5 R's to life, we're going to look at a vignette of Jenny. Jenny is a 34-year-old Year 5 teacher. She lives with her partner and 2 young children, aged 6 and 4. She is the only child and the main carer for her widowed mother, aged 60, who lives nearby and whose health is vulnerable because of diabetes. She has been supporting children remotely during the pandemic, but now has returned to working at the primary school. Some of this might ring true for you. You could also adapt the vignette if using with your staff to suit your needs. Whilst the vignette is about an adult, the principles of support we will explore are transferable and applicable with age-appropriate modifications for pupils of all ages, as well as parents and carers. So to use one of the 5 R's, recognition, by self and others, what has been recognised by Jenny and others in her situation? Jenny might be very anxious about being back into school. She might be wondering if she'll be exposed to COVID-19. People may pass it on even though they don't show signs. That might feel scary. How can she continue to look after her mother? Jenny's been struggling to sleep. Is this because of anxiety? How is she going to cope with the new class? It is really hard teaching children that haven't been in school and its normal routines, especially as the routines have changed. So we can see that there's a start of a recognition of feelings, there's questions about how she might cope, and a recognition of the challenge. It can be really helpful to recognise the struggle and difficult feelings going on in a situation. This can help a person to be curious about these feelings. Where are these feelings in the body? How often are we feeling them? How long do they last? When are they not around? And maybe others. Once recognised, this can help a person to accept these feelings for what they are and find ways of taking what they want from them and leaving behind what they don't. Using another of the 5 R's is reflection. In Jenny's reflection of her situation, she uses breathing exercises when she notices herself getting more stressed, and moments to reflect. Jenny has the courage to reflect on her dilemmas with a deputy head, someone she's found sympathetic in the past. How can she use her relationships? She shares her worries with her partner, who offers to help with the shopping for her mother. She reconnects with a best friend over the phone. She's somehow slipped out of talking regularly with all the worries. And together with her partner, they come up with ways to improve her sleep routine. One of the next 5 R's used within this vignette is regulate. On this slide, there are actions that the school is doing to help Jenny and others regulate their feelings. They're building Jenny's resilience by increasing her flexibility and helping her to have more of a sense of agency or being more in control of her life. Jenny's school taken actions such as encouraging the use of exercise, yoga, good self-care techniques and self-compassion to support staff. They use supervision to give staff an opportunity to problem solve and build capacity. They consider staff work-life balance when organising tasks within the school term. They're sensitive and back to review work meetings for any staff who are worried about how to manage work. They use signposting to potential sources of support such as counselling. They have class handover meetings between teachers booked in to build up knowledge of students in class. The deputy head has put in a diary to catch up with Jenny the first morning the students are back, and will also pop in later in the day to show her support and reassurance. The Education Support Partnership offers a free 24-hour confidential helpline. Just to note that, as the slide highlights, resilience is not only something that a person can build up themselves, but that others can help to build them through the support systems around them. For resilience to build in strength, it's built from a combination of personal actions and actions of those around them that interact with each other. Another of the 5 R's is, as we've already mentioned, resilience. In building resilience, Jenny, on a personal level, recognises that she's worried, has used her relationships to get help and begin a process of self-help. She's reflected on ideas she has and started to change what she does. This has helped to regulate Jenny's feelings, and successfully doing this will aim to rebuild Jenny's resilience and help her to move forward. Ways in which the school have supported: they've built resilience by recognising threats to her well-being and acted straight away to offer diversity-sensitive support through strategies to build positive relationships, allowed time for reflection, helped her to regulate, and successfully these things together will aim to build Jenny's resilience and improve her well-being. Using the last vignette as a guide and the 5 R's that we took you through for Jenny, you can take this vignette and consider the 5 R's for Richard. Richard is a 40-year-old Year 9 head of year. He lives with his partner and has his children to stay over 3 or 4 days a week. His children's mother works in a hospital intensive care unit and his partner works in education. He's been asked to start school a little earlier due to COVID start times. He can also be asked to attend after-school CPD sessions. His children have shown some challenging behaviours during lockdown and have not found the return to school very easy, wanting the safety of being with either their mother or their father. Applying the same 5 R's with a partner, a team or the whole school, have a look at this vignette and, using the 5 R's, consider what we might do to support Richard to increase his well-being. Finally, we'll move on to the third of the 5-element well-being framework. This one, the maybe well-known 5 ways to well-being. The 5 ways to well-being was developed based on evidence relating to individuals' behaviour. If individuals adapt their behaviour so as to incorporate more 5 ways type activities into their day-to-day lives, the empirical evidence suggests that their subjective well-being should improve. There is considerable scope for using the 5 ways to well-being to improve collective well-being in more of a strategic and indirect way, both in terms of affecting the wider circumstances in which people live to promote well-being, and by informing processes and ways of working more generally. Firstly is connect. There's strong evidence that indicates to feeling close to and valued by other people is a fundamental human need, and one that contributes to functioning well in the world. It's clear that social relationships are critical for promoting well-being and for acting as a buffer against mental ill health for people of all ages. With this in mind, you might try to do something which makes a connection. Talk to someone on the phone or video call instead of sending an email. Speak to somebody new. Ask how somebody's weekend was and really listen when they tell you. Put 5 minutes aside to find out how someone really is. The second is be active. We probably all already know that regular physical exercise is associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety across all age groups. Exercise is essential for slowing age-related cognitive decline and for promoting well-being, but it doesn't need to be particularly intense for you to feel good. Some ideas might include taking the stairs and not the lift, going for a walk at lunchtime, getting off the bus one stop earlier than usual and walking the final part of your journey, doing some easy exercise like stretching before you start work in the morning or after you finish on a night. The third is take notice. Reminding yourself to take notice can strengthen and broaden awareness. Studies have shown that being aware of what is taking place in the present directly enhances your well-being, and savouring the moment can help to reaffirm your life priorities. Heightened awareness also enhances your self-understanding and allows you to make positive choices based on your own values and motivations. Take some time to enjoy the moment and the environment around you. Here are a few ideas. Get a plan for your workplace. Have a clear the clutter day. Take notice of how your colleagues are feeling or acting. Take a different route on your daily walk. Visit a new place for lunch. There's lots of other things you can do in terms of taking notice, and many of you might be familiar with mindfulness activities. There's a number of activities out there if you Google mindfulness. The fourth way to well-being is learn. Continued learning through life enhances self-esteem and can encourage social interaction and a more active life. Anecdotal evidence suggests that the opportunity to engage in work or educational activities particularly helps lift older people out of depression. The practice of setting goals, which is related to adult learning in particular, has been strongly associated with higher levels of well-being. Why not learn something new today, this week? Here's some ideas. Find something out about your colleagues. Sign up for a class. Read the news or a book. Set up a book club. Do a crossword or a Sudoku. Research something you've always wondered about, or just learn a new word. And last but not least is give. Participation in social and community life has attracted a lot of attention in the field of wellbeing research. Individuals who report a greater interest in helping others are more likely to rate themselves as happy. Research into actions for promoting happiness has shown that committing an act of kindness once a week over a 6-week period is associated with increased well-being. I think particularly important at the moment are there any Are there any random acts of kindness that you can do for someone in the next week? As with all of these, you'll have your own ideas about what you might be able to do in the 5 areas, and we're going to look at that in the next slide. So for this part of the session, you can get yourself a pen and paper, or just do it in your mind and take 5 minutes, a minute for each way to well-being, to reflect on what you might be able to do in each of the 5 ways. There are some comments, questions and ideas to help and guide you. Once you've completed the 5 minutes, spend an extra minute thinking about which of these you could do in the next day or week. Either do this yourself or with a partner. Try and check in with yourself or your partner in a few days or a week and see how this is going. As previously mentioned, it's suggested that the nominated members of your staff cascade the key messages, the whole session or key activities with your whole staff in a way that's helpful for your sitting. I recognise there'll be a range of experience among you, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but thought it might be helpful to consider some things that might be useful if you're going to be cascading this information. Depending on your level of comfort in delivering, you might want to liaise with others in your setting about any tips or tricks. You will know your staff best. When might they prefer this information? Do they prefer twilight sessions, PD training, or maybe you want to share these recorded sessions or something similar so they can access in their own time. What do your staff already know? You might want to spend some time finding out what their general level of understanding of well-being is. Remember, we are going to be offering further support to schools during February and March. Please look out for these emails coming to your school. The Educational Psychology Service sent out documents in the summer. Please have a look over these. There might be some that are still relevant today. Mind website has a whole host of links that I'm sure would be helpful for staff. Similarly, there are lots of links to the NHS and the link on this slide. Plus there's a specific men's section. The DfE have got a specific coronavirus helpline. Here's the number. As we did in the live sessions, we recommended that before the next session you considered how the messages from the webinar might be shared with the whole school community. Some questions that you might consider is, what will I share? Will it be all of the messages from today? Or are there some that seem more relevant than others? Will the message stay within your setting, or will that be spread across the cluster or the trust? Will there be a follow-up with staff? And will you evaluate it? Some of the key messages that we'd like you to take away from today include these. Adults, children and young people will have experienced challenges and positive aspects in this pandemic. It's drawing on both of these that will continue to support us on our road to coping and recovery. It is likely that most staff will manage with whole school adaptations to supporting well-being, but these must be in place and ongoing. For some, there may be particular challenges that require further targeted support. We've all had different experiences, thoughts and feelings due to the pandemic. This is likely to lead to different ways of coping and managing. Remember, care and compassion for each other and for yourself. Thank you. I hope you found this helpful and it's sparked at least some thinking for you. If it has and you're interested in considering how some of these principles can be applied to supporting children and young people, you might want to check out our second webinar. Thank you and hope to see some of you in the follow-up sessions in February and March.